So this is the tier list for World of Warcraft expansions. Let's start at the bottom. Let's throw them all on the table first. Okay. I don't know why it's easy for me to think this way. Vanilla WoW is between an A and an S. There's certain things in Vanilla WoW that like I do genuinely think Burning Crusade did better, but I think the 1 to 60 experience in WoW is really, really good, and it's really about the World of Warcraft, right? I think the World of Warcraft 1 to 60, the entire journey, the entire everything about it is really good. Whenever you go to Burning Crusade starts to be more about the end game. Now, with that being said, the end game of Burning Crusade was better than the end game of Vanilla WoW overall, I think. There's certain things about Vanilla WoW that end up not really being a thing as much. In Burning Crusade, like, you can't use as many like potions and consumables and stuff like that. They have like battle elixirs, guardian elixirs, stuff like that. I really liked arenas. Like PvP in general, like the systems in PvP were generally better than they were in vanilla. Now, with that being said, in vanilla WoW, you didn't have as much like optimization. You started to see things get a lot more optimized in Burning Crusade. They had tier sets for all the different specs of all the different classes. The gear that was in those tier sets became more and more optimized. But you really started to see this at the end of vanilla anyway. You started to see this through AQ40 and into Nax. The Nax tier 3 gear sets are unbelievable. You have some of that in vanilla as well, and I like the open-endedness of vanilla a little bit more, like in terms of like spec variety and how you want to play your class to do different things. I don't think there's quite as much variety in Burning Crusade. Like, and I'm really speaking mostly about paladins, right? That's my main. But that's just how I felt in terms of people like, oh, well, more specs were viable in Burning Crusade. And it's like, yeah, sure. More specs were viable, as most people put them. I think, yeah, sure, more specs were better, but in terms of like playing different, like odd, weird builds, it worked a little bit more in vanilla. I think between vanilla WoW and Burning Crusade, it's really, really hard to say what's better. And also whenever you factor in the fact that like personal bias, like I peaked in Burning Crusade. I peaked in high school. So like I remember patch 2.4, which was the Sunwell patch. Isle PvP in the Sunwell patch was so incredibly fun. Now season 3 was my favorite season, but Isle PvP was so fun. It's really, really hard to say between these two, all things considered. Generally, I've said like Burning Crusade is just like a hair above vanilla, but I would probably give them both an S. After that, Wrath was really good in a lot of ways. I don't think, a lot of people think Wrath was the best expansion, or like people think Wrath was like the epitome of WoW. I didn't play a lot of Wrath, and I know that like as far as Arena goes, that probably was the peak of Arena. I think the problem with Wrath very much was the beginning of the end. I think Wrath started to introduce a lot of stuff like the looking for group, and it basically started to pave the way for things that I consider to be like the beginning of the end. When you talk about like gear score and stuff, gear score was basically what opened up the floodgates for item level becoming like a stat in and of itself. Like item level has always been in the game, but it hasn't been something that people really looked at in Burning Crusade or vanilla and Burning Crusade. It became a thing with gear score and Wrath, and then eventually got like completely fully implemented into the game. And they were like, okay, well, let's just give something an item level. That item level is a number that you plug into a formula, which is always how it works. But now, what the formula like knocks out is like, okay, here's like a fully optimized piece of gear based on this item level. And I'm personally not a big fan of that. Next up, Mists. I had very little interest in playing Mists. In fact, I completely skipped the expansion while it was active, so I don't really have like a real opinion on Mists. I have heard retroactively that the PvP in Mists was really, really good. The Isle stuff, the Isle stuff was really, really good in Mists. And it was one of those things that whenever Mist existed, everybody hated Mists. But now whenever people look at it, they're like, wait, Mist was actually pretty good. I really, really, really disliked Cataclysm. I think that Cataclysm, this was the beginning of the end, and this was like the end of WoW for me. The entire like the entire idea behind like the original class design was completely changed. This was whenever Kevin Jordan was no longer at Blizzard, and they basically came in and they were like, okay, this was kind of like the esport expansion. Like they were like, let's try and turn WoW into more of an esport. And like, now you're playing a spec instead of a class. We're going to try and make the game like the most balanced that we can make it. Everybody has some form of self-healing. Everybody has a kick. Everybody has this. Everybody has that. This is whenever everything got like really, really homogenized. I think early Cataclysm was still fun for a lot of people. Twerks, thank you for the Twitch Prime. I appreciate that, man. And that's kind of when the term Wrath Baby came about, was because Cataclysm was actually harder than Wrath in a lot of ways, and they ended up having to go through and nerf everything. It kind of shifted where it was like, okay, everything's like super optimized. Let's make things a little bit harder. Everything's super optimized. Okay, now let's make everything easier. And it just, I think Cataclysm ended up being a big mess for me personally. And I would probably put this at a C. Warlord, let's go back to Mists. I would say I don't really have a real opinion on Mists. This is all hearsay, and this is just like from what I've heard from other people and just based on what I've seen on my own, like leveling through the areas. Mists is probably like a C+ or something, if Cataclysm is a C. I think Legion was actually definitely better than Cataclysm and Mists. I actually thought Legion was probably the best expansion since Wrath. I actually think Legion was the best expansion since Wrath. And I was very surprised by that whenever I played it. I did not think it was better than any of these. And I don't even think it was particularly good, right? I actually don't even think Legion was particularly good. But for the sake of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rankings, I do think that this is about where it would be placed in. And then other than that, I would say Warlords and BFA are probably D tier. Warlords introduced garrisons. Really, really, really bad. I remember whenever I came back to the game, because I hard quit in Cataclysm, didn't touch Mists, and then I came back for WoD, and I was so hyped up. I was like, you know what, dude? Maybe I will play again. They're going back to Draenor, going to Outland, you know, Draenor, Outland, all that stuff. Maybe they're going to try and like call back to Burning Crusade and make the game good again, but that's not what they ended up doing. And it just ended up sucking. They added in garrisons. I kind of felt for the first time that that's whenever they like shattered the community aspect of the game, because at least Cataclysm had like community started to fall off at the end of vanilla through Burning Crusade. Like community just slowly started to dwindle away, right? But by the time you hit WoD, it was like just the bottom, like just like that was about where community like died off to me. When was sharding added? It was I think it was added in Warlords actually. Yeah, Farmville and Panda 2, was it? I don't even know. So, but yeah, you got this is like the Farmville expansion. It was really dumb. I got to the point where I was so bored with the game, I would log on like every day, run around my garrison. I'd run down the shaft, run back up the shaft, and then I'd log out. You know, like I'd do the mining stuff, log out. BFA, it's kind of the same way. I mean, I just ran out of stuff to do, and I just got like flat out bored in BFA. So like, for the sake of ranking them in this order, this is probably where I would rank them. I'm on a single iteration while I was S tier. I think every X pack, including Glasgow, have been a lot better. But yeah, I do think there's improvements that could have technically been made. This list is wrong. Well, frick, dude. No, yeah. So this is how I would probably rank the expansions if I were to put them into 5 spots. Switch Legion with Mop. I don't know. I actually think Legion was probably better than Mop, and I didn't really play Mop. I leveled through it and just hearing from different people. I put Legion in the A class. Wait. I put Legion in the A. See, I didn't like it. I actually didn't. I didn't think. Like, maybe the classes played better in Legion, but I did not like it as much as how they played in Burning Crusade. And I know, like, Ret was a lot better in Legion than it was in Burning Crusade or Vanilla, but that's how I felt with Paladin specifically.